You ready, Richard?
I have just lost my internet connection. Give it 2 minutes.
Okay.
And we are waiting on some guests that I believe are on the way.
All right.
Pauline, you know how to flip control over to my computer if and when needed?
To yours? You sent me a presentation. I don't have access to your computer. I have access to mine.
In the middle of the meeting, if he wants to show his screen, you just hit the presentation button instead of clerk PC. Does that make sense? We can come help you when it comes time.
Where it says presentation in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well,
Okay, I guess we'll start the meeting now that our manager has his internet connection back. And I want to welcome everybody to City Hall today to attend the Water and Sewer Utility Committee meeting, special meeting on Thursday, May the 30th, 2024 at 12 noon. Before we start, I'd just like to state that Councillor Matard has previous engagement at 12:30, so he'll have to leave at that time. And I'll now call the order of business, call to order. Approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chair, just under the call to order, we'll still have quorum.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. When Justin leaves or Councilor Matart leaves at 12:30.
Oh,
So
yeah,
we'll-
yeah, sure, yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no problem. Okay, moved by Councillor Ramsey, second by Councillor Matard. Any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none. Adoption of the previous draft minutes, May the 9th. Okay. Councillor Matard, Councillor Ramsey. Any business arising from the minutes? No, not today. We have one discussion report today. It's the Water and Sewer Utility Communications Project. We're going to start off with Richard McEwen, our utility manager. He's going to do a presentation for us. Thank you.
So thank you very much. The principal reason for today's meeting is we put forward to council a proposal for a value for money audit of our communications project. And council has sent it back to the committee to gather more information to help them in making the decision as to whether or not they want to proceed with that value for money audit. So what I prepared for you today and gave you a report, and we'll go through that report, is the information that I feel we've gathered to help with council to make that decision to see if they feel that we can provide them that information or if they still want to proceed with a third-party review of the project. So some background on the project. The utility is looking to upgrade their communications system for their water and sewer network. We went to tender once, and a response came back that was with a greater value than we could manage at that time. A year later, we re-tendered, changed the scope a bit, put a tender out for a communications request that was principally an over-the-air system. Our older system is a radio-based system and over the air, and what we put out was for an upgrade to that system, principally over the air with one fiber connection between McAleer and City Hall. And in the response that we received to that tender request, there was an alternate proposal presented to us where the contractor offered that rather than simply over the air for most of it in one fiber connection, they offered us a project where everything would be done through fiber optic connection. with the understanding that they would lease back that fiber to us through an IRU. And through negotiations with them, we explained that we can't have them owning the infrastructure, our infrastructure projects, we need to own that infrastructure. So rather than them providing us with an IRU to make use of the fiber, we would reverse that and have them, we would provide an IRU to them so that they could make use of the fiber. So at their expense, they began the process of putting the infrastructure in place where we would have a completely fiber optic communications network, and any additional capacity within that network they could use. And if or when they make money on that, we would also get a royalty from that revenue. So the original project scope was for a communications project that would only serve the water and sewer utility. We've got the offer came back to a fiber optic project that would provide benefits to water and sewer, the city corporation, and then the contractor, possibly to the public, and any revenue generated through that, the utility would receive a royalty on that. So we agreed in principle to that, and that we would draft the specific terms of that IRU, but we signed an agreement with them, a memorandum of understanding, that we would proceed with the project under those terms. So we've been working on that project for quite some time now, and it has been a difficult project. Putting that much fiber optic in the ground, underground, has taken us a long time. It was more challenging than we originally envisioned, but now we have the conduit in the ground. Most of the fiber is loaded in the conduit. Now we need to make the agreement so that we make those connections, so that it's not just going to be the connections that will be for the city, but also for the contractor, their connections. We want to make sure that we have the terms of that IRU in place before we make those final connections. So we're at that point in the project where we need to sign the IRU and have that commitment on the project so that we can move forward with the project. Pauline, if you want to share my screen, I'll go through the details in the report.
Mr. Chair, could I just ask, this was mentioned at the last meeting. It was requested by UCC that we have to sign the IRU before this is completed. So is that what you said, Richard? Just want to clarify that.
So the memorandum of understanding had us signing the IRU much earlier on in this process, and we've been working through the specific terms of the IRU, and we've been delayed on that. But the memorandum of understanding was that we would sign that IRU much earlier on in this process.
And Mr. Chair, just to again clarify, in the MOU, I'm glad that Jordan Brown, our lawyer, is here because he's representing our interests. The IRU is to be mutually agreed by both parties.
Correct, as
Thank
is
you.
any agreement.
I
where
just
there's-
wanted to have that in the record. Thank you.
Sure. And so you're asking the question, or you just want to say a statement? Is that what you're,
I asked a question, he answered it.
Okay.
And that is that it has to be mutually agreed.
between the contractor and the utility?
Between us, utility, City of Charlottetown, utility, and the contractor.
All right.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Continue on. Manager Richard.
So the value for money audit had a request that we would show the amount of fiber optic cable installed and spliced and testing and documentation for the existing fiber optic network. So I've presented in the past, but can present again the map that shows the extent of our fiber optic cables. And it stretches out to all of our well fields, that is our Suffolk, our Union, Brackley, and Milton Station well fields, and comes all the way into the city and then through the city and to our pollution, as far as our pollution control plant and our Brighton lift station, and then other lift stations in the downtown core. And another piece was a photo log of all of the vaults, and we have that as well. And I'll go through an example. So this is from the contractor. Late last year, they did a log of all of the vaults, and we can go through some of the examples. And it kind of showing what is in the vault. And So there are 100 or more of them, and into these different groupings. Check some of the downtown ones. And you can also see that there are coordinates marked on these files. I haven't had this very long, but I expect that these coordinates, well, they will help us to map these vaults, and we also know where they are, but it'll help us to inform our GIS system. So showing that the fiber optic cables are in the vault. So that was another request. So some of those things are available to us and can be showed. And the other request was an understanding of the value of the project. So one of the things that I looked for on the internet was kind of to get an assessment of the value and figuring out how much it would cost to put in infrastructure of this nature. So it's the conduit and the fiber optic cables. So there are, I found through the US government where they have a good representation of this. So this is a number of projects for them over the years looking at putting conduit in for telecommunications along a road corridor. So you can see on this graph gives cost per unit, and for them it's dollars per mile, and for us I did the conversion for dollars to kilometers to come up with a costing for us, and actually used an average which puts us kind of further down on this graph. And back to our report for the conduit installation, it's about 81,000 Canadian dollars per kilometer based on this information from the US. We have 36 kilometers, so about a $3 million estimate just based on these average numbers from the US. And then the fiber installation, a similar graph that I'll go back to and show you, but again, about $15,000 per kilometer to install this infrastructure. That gives a rough estimate, and it could be different, but just to give you an understanding of what the project value for this could be. So these are again, the conduit installation, and I was running at $85,000 Canadian per kilometer with the conversion of US dollars and miles to kilometers. It comes pretty comparable in this graph, but really taking a lower valuation than some of the others. But it was I thought, reasonable and close to the average. And the same with the conduit, the value, or the fiber optics, sorry, about $15,000 per kilometer. And again, that is on the lower end of this graph, so I feel confident in giving you those numbers as a potential valuation for this project. Then also a review of what we've actually spent on this project. So each year, kind of our costs. And one of the questions is, how much more is this costing us? We haven't paid the contractor anything for 2 years. The delays we have put on them, and we haven't paid them anything in the last 2 years. And then some of our subcontractors, and they're here with us today, and when I look at this table, I recognize that they see the value in this project because they haven't charged me maybe as much as the time and effort that they've put into this project. It's been a long project, and I appreciate their efforts in helping to get this valuable project for the city over the finish line. So we did have a significant amount of funding for this project. Take you through this table. So this is our principal contractor, Williams Murphy McLeod, and then the subcontractor is UCC. So these are the payments to them over the years. We paid $2 million because much of the work has been completed. The materials are there and they're in the ground. And then Coles has been our consultant. BWW is another on-site contractor that we've had providing some oversight because of their expertise with directional drilling, which is what most of this project was. And then our legal team helping us through the IRU. And then we've had funding for the contractor and the consultant. And our cost to date is about $381,000 for this project that potentially has a $3 million plus valuation to it. And we still have a holdback from the contractor to pay them when they finish their project. And then I still have some estimated costs for our other subcontractors who are helping us on this project. In the end, this project, I'm hopeful, will cost us about half a million dollars for the utility and the city to have this very valuable piece of infrastructure. So again, we're working on the IRU with the subcontractor, and the IRU is allowing them to use the infrastructure that they have put significant money into to put it into the ground, and then also to maintain it. So rather, if there is some problem with it, if somebody accidentally breaks it, they will be responsible for going out and doing the repair, and they'll be doing the repair to their fiber as well as our fiber. And I believe that's everything that I have for the presentation. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
Well, thank you, Richard. That's certainly very informative. I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions, so I'll just open the floor up. Council.
Thank you, Chair. I think, and maybe I missed it, where is the indication of what is actually remaining to be completed to finish off the project from a scope perspective?
Yeah, so what is remaining is making the connection. So the conduit has been installed, most of the fiber lines have been placed in the conduit, and now it's the connections wherever there are connection points, either into our facilities or where one cable from one segment meets another.
Go ahead.
No, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Richard. I think what I'm hearing is that's broadly saying the connections. What is actually like timeline? Like is that 2 weeks more worth of work? Is it 2 months more worth of work? Is it 2 years worth? What is actually left from a breakdown perspective on completing this project from the points of what you just said, connections and those things? I think we're saying what's left, but we need to drill down and know exactly what that looks like to complete this project so that we can negotiate an IRU if that is applicable to having all the work completed before we enter that agreement.
Yeah, so I mean, that's the tricky piece, right? So the contractor is concerned about making all those connections and the commitment to all that infrastructure in the ground, and then for some reason we don't go ahead with an IRU with them, then where does that leave us? They've made all this commitment, and then we're not going to stand up to our end of the bargain. I mean, that's all their money and work that they have put into this project, with the understanding we signed an agreement with them that they would have access to that fiber, because they put up the extra money to put all this conduit in the ground and all the fiber, so allowing the network to have that potential growth into the future. And it will take time to make those connections, and it could take a significant amount of time. And as we get into it, we'll have a better feeling and understanding for that. So right now we have a functional system between City Hall and our Kent Street, and in our well field between our booster station and our well field. Those are connections that do function, and that they are set up and the connections are made. And the rest of the connections, it will take time, and it will take months to make those connections. But the contractor's concern is they want to make sure that we're still committed to this project.
Did you want to give him an opportunity?
Yeah, I'll give him an opportunity. I'd like to say some stuff. I'm sure the mayor has one or two questions.
Yeah,
But,
thank you,
go ahead, Councilor
Chair.
Ramsey.
And thank you, Richard, for the presentation. Justin basically hit a few of my points too. Like, it's great to say this and that, and when this, what we as a group are wanting to know is an end date. Like, this has been going on since 2019, and you kept saying you just stated it's gonna be a few more months before everything's hooked up. Like, this is, like, we've been kicking this can down the road now for 4 years, and this project was not supposed to go 4 years. And is somebody's holding somebody's feet to the fire on this? And this is just my own personal opinion. I just want answers, because this should not have, we were told when it first started, taken 4 years. And now you're even stating today that it's gonna be more time. It's gonna be more time. So, we need answers before we can even do anything on this thing. Thank you.
Would you like to answer there, Richard,
Yeah,
please?
so when we started this project, we underestimated the amount of time and the challenge of completing the project. And I can say that, I mean, obviously, when we look back at it, we were very hopeful that things would go quick and easy and smooth. And there are some sections that did, but a lot of it is finding a route through all of the existing infrastructure to get this in place, and challenges with us not knowing where everything is underground. If I were doing this again and looking at putting 36 kilometers of fiber optic cable into the city, we've done multi-year projects putting in kilometers of sewer main and water main, and it takes years. And we were under some pressure to try and get it done, and we were hopeful that we could get it done more quickly. But looking back, it was unrealistic to say that we could do all of this work in months. It just, when you're 36 kilometers of infrastructure into the ground, it takes a long time. And we've done multi-year projects, and if I could go back, I'd try and give you a much more realistic timeline on it. And I don't want you thinking that we can make all those connections instantly either. It will take us months to make those connections, but we need to recognize the importance of this project, keep working on it, and get through it. We've really completed the most difficult part of it, getting that conduit in the ground. And now it's much easier to make those connections, but it's still difficult. You're talking about thousands and thousands of tiny fiber connections, and I've watched people make those connections, and you test them and you make sure you got them right, and it will take time to finish that, but we need to continue to recognize the benefit of this project. This is a multi-million-dollar project that we're getting for a fraction of the cost, and will be great for communications for the water and sewer utility and the city of Charlottetown.
Thank you. I'll just go ahead, Councilor
Oh,
Ramsey, and then Councilor-
like, and this is just a statement, like, since this started, I certainly hope it's a cost saving for the city.
Yeah.
Because this, as I keep saying, we've been kicking this can down the road, and, you know, doesn't seem like it's, I just hope it works out, Richard, is all I'm saying, because, you know, we're on the highway internet thing here, have been for years, and let's just hope that everything works out.
Thank you, Councilor Ramsey. Go ahead, Councilor Matar.
Thank you, Chair. So just back on the connections, I guess I'm trying to get my head around, is the agreement that we have indicate that the deliverables are to have all connections in place at whatever locations that may be? Or is the agreement to get us to a certain point where we start to operationalize it and then those connections are made after the fact? Like, what is if the deliverables were A, B, and C, and we don't have C done at this point, then I believe that we haven't fulfilled the obligations of the agreement to have those connections in place. Or is it contingent upon the IRU, which sounds like if we don't enter into that, then we will not get the connections completed? So I want to know contractually, do we have that, is that in the contract to have full scope completion of the connections?
So Jordan can correct me if I go wrong. We have a construction contract. A component of that construction contract is a memorandum of understanding that we have accepted the alternate bid. So we put out a contract for a communication system. We agreed to accept that alternate bid that was for a full fiber system. And in that memorandum of understanding, we said that very early on in this process, we would sign the IRU. And I didn't want to continue to delay the construction. We needed to get going with the construction. Always with the principal terms of it are laid out in the MOU. It's the fine, detailed points on is it a this or a that or a shall or may, those fine details. It's taken us too long, really, to get that signed. The IRU ideally would have been signed before we began the construction, but I didn't want to delay our construction start for working through the fine details and the language in that IRU. Our understanding and acceptance with that memorandum of understanding was that, yes, we would like a fully fiber optic network. And yes, we understand that you're putting money into this agreement by putting all that conduit in the ground, all of the fiber optic, and in exchange for us getting this upgraded system, you will have the IRU for the extra strands that you put in place. So that MOU contemplates and says that IRU will be signed very early on in this process. And we haven't done that. We've continued on in good faith through the construction project, recognizing that we've already signed an MOU as a part of that initial construction contract that said, yes, we want that alternate proposal and we're going to proceed down that road.
Thank you for that, Richard. I just have a question myself on that. you know, I was part of this committee when we first started, and you know, this is why we came last month and we said, listen, we need more information. And you've been good. The value on this is over 3 million. We're paying $500,000, which is terrific news. We're going to have a great fiber optic system in place. But we wanted, the committee and myself, we wanted to be able to go to the contractors or the overseers of this operation and get some definite answers that, yes, this is going well. We've hit some you know, points that, you know, there was delays. But is it moving forward? Are we going to have this completed? You know, you talk about the contract, it's been delayed. You know, we're in good faith now, and why can't we get this signed? Is there a reason that we're waiting for these months after months? And I respect everybody coming in here today because, you know, this is where we get an answer. Are we on track? Is there a completion date in the foreseeable future? Are we going to get the value that we anticipated, the $500,000 for a $3 million, you know, operation? So that someone has to answer us. So we can go back to council and say, listen, you know, we've had the contractors in, the overseers, you know, or the lawyer. Everything is looking good, and we see the end point. So someone has to tell me that I can go back to council with the committee and saying, we're on track here. So can you help alleviate some of
Yeah,
this
so
concerns?
what I've tried to show you today, and I mean, walking around with my children, they're like, hey, Dad, there's one of those communication vaults. We can see it. We've seen it over the years. The infrastructure is there in place. We have photo logs for all the vaults, and everybody knows and has seen the orange conduit, and you can see the vaults out there. And we have a functioning system between City Hall and 70 Kent Street. Those are the things, the milestones that I look for. If you can make it work across 30 meters, you can make it work across 30 kilometers. But we need to have the understanding that in good faith, we started down this road. It's been a long road, and I want to get to the finish line. And for me, some of the milestones, the hesitations I had was doing the directional drilling here on Kent Street. That was a piece when we got through that. That was significant. This is downtown Charlottetown with infrastructure that's been in the ground for more than 100 years. And we got that conduit in place. We have the conduit. It is in place in all the places. That's the directional drilling aspect, getting that infrastructure in the ground. And now it's making the connections. And he's demonstrated that he can make the connections and make the system work. And now the contractor's looking for that commitment from us that we're going to hold up our end of the bargain, that we agreed that they are putting this extra money in place and they would have the IRU on any additional strands that they put into this network. And I want to go away with our legal counsel and the subcontractor and say it's time. There's only a few little points left in that IRU for us to agree on before we can bring it to council for their approval. We need that both parties, so it's our city solicitor and the subcontractor, that we're good with the details of the contract, the specific language in the contract, and bring it back to you. But the overarching details of it were agreed to with the memorandum of understanding when we began this process, when we accepted their tender and the alternate proposal, which was, yes, we want a fully fiber optic network, and yes, you will have the right to use those additional strands that you put in at your cost.
And I understand, I mean, that's a great explanation, but I want to hear it from the general contractor, the overseer of the operation. Are they confident that this is going forward in a manner that, you know what, there's a few little issues, you know, it's coming forward. That's what I want to do, so I can go back to council and say, we've spoken with the general contractor, our legal representative, everybody says to me that this is good to go, we're on a path moving forward. So it doesn't come back to me and this committee saying, you know, you should have did something more. We want to do our due diligence of getting the confirmation, because I know nothing about this. I attend these meetings, I listen to this, I don't know what a conduit is or fiber optic, right? So we're going in good faith, giving you the direction, the faith in you to oversee this operation, that this is going to be good for the city and the city residents. We're going to get a great deal, but I have to have it from our legal representative and the general contractor to say that this is good. Is the committee in favor of that? I mean, you know, we're at that point that we need that right now.
And a closing date too, Your Worship, or Mr. Chair, because we've been hearing the last few months, it's 89%, 92%, some even mentioned 96%, 98%. Like, where are the numbers? Like, are we close to 100? Don't say 92 if it's only 86 or something like that. And this is what people are wondering. Thank you.
And this, I understand construction, and there's delays and obstacles, but we have to know, and this is the whole idea of the notice of motion there before, to save the city more money. If the general contractors and yourself think that this is a great system, we're going forward, then we're good with that, right? So that's where we want to know. We have to know that answer. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Just one sec.
Yeah.
Do you realize what I'm saying, Richard?
I yield the floor to the subcontractor and our legal counsel, and they have been invited, and you're asking them to come to the mic, and
Yeah, can we do that?
Could I just ask the manager some questions regarding what he said?
Sure.
So, at the last meeting, Mr. Chair, I did make it very clear that there's no political witch hunt on behalf of me, my family, or anybody that worked on my campaign regarding this issue. This is an issue I've been dealing with since 2019. How that get into the discussion, I don't know, but I want to make it very clear.
Just 1 second, Mayor Brown. You know, I did that, I said that for clarification. There's nothing about you, your political will, your family. You know, you keep bringing this up, but there's nothing. I just brought it up for clarification, who the person was, who was the subcontractor, right? And if that was a wrong word that I brought up, then so be it. I apologize for that. But you keep bringing this up about your family and all this stuff. This got nothing to do with that.
Excuse
And
me.
It's my mistake if I did it.
Mr. Chair, just like your family was involved in the elections that I participated in, and not only my family, but my wife and kids, so.
You're turning this.
No, I'm not turning.
You're using this for
I'm-
political thing.
no.
I just said that the man ran against you.
Yeah.
That's what it.
Yeah.
There's nothing about you or your family and
Yeah.
everything else.
Well, I
around
want to
your
make it
family.
clear,
You know, there was nothing like that.
Yeah.
So.
my
let's
family worked in the
clarify that.
campaign, I just want to make that clear. So, to get back to my question, I did ask at the last meeting, what's the criterion that we're using for evaluating what's being installed, completed? You have not pointed that out, Richard, and I want to give you two examples. February 13th, 2024, you gave us a capital projects update. And that capital projects update talked about the communications upgrades, 90%. At our last meeting, our February meeting of this, that was February of 13, 2024. In July 12th, 2023, you gave us another update of capital projects. It was 90% done. So between those two periods, it's 90% done. Then at the meeting on April 28th, when we had the discussion, numbers were used of 98%, 99%. So where's the criterion? I asked, and I brought it up during the approval of the agenda, what's the criterion? So that's my first question. The other thing too, Richard, is that I gave a notice of motion back in December, and I outlined very clearly what I was asking for this full independent third-party review. Very clearly, and that was December. That was just an EOI. I'm going to put these, to place these on the record again. to show what I'm looking for. And when I talk about the IRU and the MOU that was signed, it was clearly indicated in the MOU that both parties would mutually agree to the IRU. That's both parties. So that's where we're at now. So could I just ask, Mr. Chair, if there was, just pointing out the completion date, 90%, 2023, February 2024, 90% done. I just want a clarification in the criterion. That's my first question. Richard?
Yeah, so the most difficult piece to this project is getting the conduit into the ground. And right now, the conduit is to all locations, and that's principally what we were looking at when we were giving you those valuations. So it's the conduit in the ground, and most of it has the fiber loaded in. So the rest of the piece is making the connections.
Okay, just to, if you allow me 2 questions, Mr. Chair? So, you looked at the cost of, I asked for the cost, and I'm just going to go back to our meeting package where you gave us the numbers. Those numbers were given to us last year, what we paid for Coles Associates, what we paid for our lawyer, $45,000, who's representing us. BWW, Mr. Chair, is Boyd Woodard. He's been doing site work, Coles, and WM&M. So, Mr. Chair, we did ask for the general contractor to be here. Who's representing the general contractor? No, you're the subcontractor. The general contractor is Williams, Murphy, and McLeod. They are the general contractor. Are they here today?
Doesn't appear as though they were able to be here, but the subcontractor is here.
But, Mr. Chair, you deal with the construction business. Our company has been subcontractors. We answer to the general contractor because in the end, it's their bond. They hold the bond on this job, the surety bond. So it's their bond. It's not the subcontractors. I'm disappointed that we don't have the general contractor because we did ask for the general contractor.
We did ask, and we were hoping that they would be here to answer the questions. Yes, I acknowledge that. They were asked to be here. Now, if they couldn't be here, we changed the meeting time previously so everybody could be here, but
Yeah.
the contractor's not here.
So just on the GCC not being here, the general contractor, if you look at their cost, and I'm looking at from last year's cost, hasn't changed too much. So in terms of what's been done and how it's been inspected, whether it's through Coles or Boyd Woodard, his is the only cost. I think his cost went down, so we must have gave him a credit. But my point is, Richard, is that we've all these checks and balances in place, right? And when you talk about our investment of over $500,000, that $1.6 million is federal funding, correct?
Yes, it was infrastructure funding.
So that $1.6 million is our liability. They gave that money to us to develop this project. Correct?
Correct?
So you made the comparison with the Americans doing the similar type of project in the United States. Well, I can tell you, with cell service in Canada, vis-a-vis cell service in the United States, totally different. They have greater competition there. That's why prices are probably in a better position for contractors, suppliers to do jobs. So I thought we'd have a Canadian example on what it would cost elsewhere in the country to do something similar to what we're doing. And Richard, we have to keep in mind, Mr. Chair, I don't know if the American example was qualified that the utility was doing that and keeping that infrastructure, or it was being farmed out, given to a subcontractor through an IRU. Did we find that out, Richard? Like, was this American dollar comparison, was it for the utility company doing it on its own and then keeping that infrastructure? Or was it handing it off to a subcontractor to carry out the business of fiber network?
So those are simply construction costs to put conduit along roadside or fiber optic communication along a roadside. Just, those are construction costs. I struggle to understand kind of who the ownership or how that has an influence on it. It's thousands of projects that they've done in the US to give a comparison for costs. And again, I took the lower end of that, and you're recognizing the greater amount of competition there that actually drives pricing down. Again, and it was just to give you an example or an idea about the cost to do this work. And directional drilling here has a significant cost. And this project would cost more money if we went to tender for 36 kilometers of buried fiber optic cable and conduit. And all I did was, I found this, I thought it was a great resource of over the years, looking at all these construction projects quite comparable to ours, and possibly many of that reading through the notes in Open Highway, which we had some of and is easy, but they also referenced anything in a downtown core, the price went much higher, and I didn't make that adjustment for giving you this example.
So, Mr. Chair, I will get an opportunity to ask other questions, correct?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
That's the whole idea that we're here for, right? Is to ask the questions to get the answers so we can go back to council. So, like I say, we're free to answer questions, ask questions, Most of the people arrived and they're good to go. So what would you like to ask?
No, if Richard wants to turn the mic over to our lawyer, Jordan Brown, and the subcontractor, we can keep going back and forth, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, the reason for this was, to see where we're at, and like I say, give us an answer where we're going. And when is the completion date, so we can go back to council with an informed decision to say, listen, the contractors, general contractors, the professional people are all on side with us here, and they want us to move ahead. That'd be great. So if someone could come up and explain where we're at, where we're going, please. Where are we going? Are we going with Mr. Brown? That would be great, because like I said, and not to be rude or say anything, we've been waiting for quite a while. And is it on us that we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing? Are we getting the request in time, or is it the work being done? Is where we're at. So you just please tell us, Jordy. Mr. Brown, thank you.
I think, thanks, Mr. Chair. I think from my perspective, there's probably a few things worth denoting. And maybe just to pick up on Richard's presentation, and maybe to address some of them in a way that is kind of as neutrally put as possible without creating any issues. This project was originally brought on, as has been pointed out, to happen on a timeline created by the federal government, and that timeline was incredibly tight. As Richard's pointed out, probably wasn't realistic at the time. In fact, I think everybody acknowledged when this was happening that it was not realistic, but if it didn't happen, the money wasn't going to come and the infrastructure wasn't going to go. And the price of this project that the city was going to have to pay was going to be astronomically, not just exponentially, higher. So I'd maybe just address that. I'm not saying that Richard didn't, but like my recollection, and we could go back, there was a letter that we had prepared to the CAO and the mayor back at that time, it was in 2019, expressing some reservations about kind of the speed at which we were going, and some of the things that we thought needed to be nailed down back then. And, the blunt reality was if we wanted to take advantage of this funding envelope, it needed to happen. And there weren't a whole pile of options available to make it happen either. So I maybe just fairly general context, but I think
You're doing great.
incredibly important in the context of this conversation, because we can all look back now and say, oh, well, we should have known this, but we did. We talked about it, and decisions were made to move forward back at that time. So, and then obviously the timeline didn't progress as like the most ambitious timeline at the time may have anticipated. There were a couple of extensions, as I recall, to the federal funding, which, you know, kind of graciously allowed things to progress to a point. I think we probably all need to bear in mind that the federal funding had their conditions in terms of what this fiber optic connection was meant to do. It's my understanding that that's largely being complied with. But then there are these extra things that the city is hoping to get out of this. And so, as Richard has indicated, there was a tender out and an alternative proposal proposed when the tender went out. And so there were minimum requirements set out in the tender that had to do with the, we'll say, the federal funding envelope and the city's engagement of that. But then there are extra pieces, again, that, you know, would have been more set out in the MOU that was ultimately signed. And as has been, you know, raised here, the blunt reality is that everybody will have to agree on, you know, what this is going to look like going forward from whatever finishing point we decide to take off from. And again, that was acknowledged at the time and pointed out as well, and does include all of the details that go along with that. We have had, honestly, for about 3.5 years now, a draft agreement together. I'll just say this, I would say maybe as many as half a dozen times now we've discussed many of the points that we're not fully in agreement on in terms of what we would advise the city should be doing. And in terms of what the contractor, the subcontractor would want in that agreement. And I think I can say in a forthright way, because the project is not at that final point, nobody has, like, the pressure really hasn't been on us to, when I say on us, I don't just mean on Cox and Palmer, I mean on the subcontractor and on city staff and everybody else to say, okay, we just need to get to a bottom line on this. Yeses or nos. And I think, you know, from our perspective, the moment that happens, that usually sharpen things up quite a bit. So if we got a definitive, we need this done by this time. The agreement, as I say, has basically been ready for quite a period of time. It would really just be to hammer out what is the final, these are bottom lines, these are what the parties will live with. My experience, that can usually happen quite quickly. City's got a bit of a different timeline than your usual commercial operator where, you know, we'd probably need to have an agreement ratified by council. But, you know, save for that normal process, these things come together fairly quickly from where we are now. So that's kind of my context and perspective. I don't know if there are any specific questions, but happy to take them.
No, I mean, it certainly helps, because we were saying we're waiting on agreement, and we're thinking, well, what's the problem? So if you know, you've outlined a lot of the issues of where we're going, the federal government allotment of support, you know, the timeline. So, I mean, it certainly opens your eyes, you know, in my perspective, that, you know, things are going ahead and you're confident with it, and you know, your idea is to keep the city safe, which is what we pay you for, and it's greatly appreciated. Is there any questions for Mr. Brown? By Mr. Brown or Mr. Ramsey?
Thank you, Jordan. I guess we keep beating it up to death. So basically, if I can grasp it all, is what you're saying is once the MOU and everything is signed, the work should be completed just shortly after that. Am I wrong thinking that? Should say. You know, once everything's all signed.
Okay, so I better be careful about how I answer this. It probably largely depends on what your definition of the work is. So, I mean, there's work, like the initial phase of work, which is to get the conduit, the cable in the ground, and then to have them kind of spliced into the system. It's actually the city's obligation to, in terms I didn't realize before this, but I do now, put light through them, and in other words, make them work to do whatever the city needs them to do. So, like, that's an initial phase of work. The agreement that we're working on effectively presumes that we're through that stage. In other words, there's a responsibility to do all that work, and that the contractor or subcontractor would have that done, and it delineates a number of strands that are to be identified in certain ways and to be demarcated on the road, and who will deal with locates and all that kind of stuff. But then after that, the work, quote unquote, gets to be who's maintaining this thing. And beyond that, the way this is set up is as the contractor, effectively begins to make use of it, there becomes obligations of the contractor, which are effectively work, to effectively track and then, provide the city with a stream of revenues from the cable. And the agreement deals with that as well. And then one of the probably more controversial terms of the agreement is how long does it last for, and what are the expectations that once that term expires, it will roll over into something new. And of course, with that, the kind of inherent consideration gets to be, how much investment time does the contractor put into doing more work to maintain the thing as you get close to that point in time.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, you good?
Chair, you and I have been sitting at this table now this is 5 years, right? And you remember when it first started?
Yep.
I brought it up because it was in a closed meeting. We had to go into a closed meeting because I said, what's this communications project? And I think covered, this is about fiber network. Remember that?
Yeah, yeah.
So any of the meetings that took place, Mr. Brown, had to be in closed session. But it's a public contract. It wasn't until Sue Hendricken, who came in as acting director of community service, this doesn't fall under section 119 of the MGA that requires to go into a closed session. So ever since, we've been holding these meetings in an open session. And so, Mr. Brown, we've been in the dark at the beginning, right from the beginning. This project was going on, and the only reason we found out, we kept prodding, poking. And that was our former CAO, Mr. Kelly, that was, I think, looked at the funding and made the funding work with our utility manager, Mr. McEwen. But the IRU agreement, right? That's a 25-year contract. So our lawyer is saying that because in the MOU, we'd have to sign in our IRU, because as you reminded me many times, I signed it. I signed it, yes, because we were told that this was a project going forward, that there were timelines that were going to be done. I think the first timeline was to be done by the end of 2019, Mr. Chair. That was the first timeline. So, and then COVID hit, but COVID hit 2 years later. So this is a pretty specific document. In your legal background, do you do a lot of these IRUs, Mr. Brown?
I'm not sure which document it is that you're referring to.
The IRU agreement that we have in front of us,
Okay,
that I have a copy of, that I received from, I think, from Richard or from someone within or maybe yourself. But have you done many of these? Like, this is a pretty specific technical document.
this document itself would have been like, the direct answer to your question, no, I have not done many of those, and I'm not actually aware of any similar, we'll say, setups in terms of IRUs or anything like them that we could get our hands on, frankly.
So who made this up?
A combination of the subcontractor and ourselves. Yeah.
Oh, the subcontractor. But, okay. So, because in one part of it, it says, section 5.4.5, except where Charlottetown Water Sewer Corporation indicates they do not require additional fiber strands in the UCC initiated lateral, UCC shall reserve for the use of Charlottetown Water Sewer Corporation, where a lateral of 48 or more strands is installed, 10% of the strands subject to minimum of 12 strands to a maximum. Well, what do we get? Do we get 12 strands, 24 strands? like,
It depends on what kind of connection, I guess, Your Worship, you would be looking at in particular. Through the document, if you read it through, there are a number of different definitions in terms of different segments of the network that will be created. And there's a delineation as to the number of strands that would be set out. And so if you go back to the tender package that would have gone out, it would have required a communications network that met certain criteria. And I'm not the technical person. Mr. Lowens here probably could answer some of those questions, or Mr. McEwen. But my understanding would be that many of those technical requirements could be met through very few strands of cable, and that we'll say to be safe or to predict what the city's use might be in the future, the city has asked that additional strands of fiber optic cable be added into an allocation that it can use going forward. And those minimum standards have been set out in the IRU, that frankly, they could have been anything. The numbers that are there would have been the numbers that we were given at the time. And that those different strands need to be demarcated appropriately such that if a value for money audit was ever performed, the auditor could go through and figure out, these 9 strands are the city's and those other 42 or whatever they are belong to the contractor.
Mr. Chair, that's why we got an IRU agreement that was jointly put together by our legal counsel and the subcontractor. Okay, that's what we have here. So that's why I've been pressing, and I think, Mr. Chair, we don't always agree, but you know what? Some of the information that was presented today could be part of sending this on to a third-party independent reviewer to get his or her stamp of approval, yes, 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 no, this has to be fixed up. That's why these agreements, like I've gone through this many times, and I'm just saying, Richard, as an engineer, I think he might know some of the technical part of it, but when you're dealing with fiber network, I think you have a situation that requires a lot of technical background. And if I can just go to one other item, Mr. Chair, just as a follow-up, I know Richard had spoken to a constituent of yours, Atlantic Broadband Consulting, Inc., and they did an IRU technical review. Now, I don't know, Mr. Chair, if you received it, but I got a copy of it, and this was done in October 2022. And he gave an evaluation. I'm going to also provide this as public record. And he talks about the MOU, and this is where he says that the MOU Figure 2 states the city would agree to enter into an IRU with the contractor and/or subcontractor, CWSC, Charlottetown Water Sewer Corporation, complies and have been working on the IRU and addressing certain aspects of the IRU will ensure both parties are fairly represented, and a mutual contract can be agreed upon. That's what we have to do. We were told at another meeting by the subcontractor, he's not going to finish the job until the IRU is signed. So that means, you know what? I'm going to go out and buy a house in Hidden Valley and just say, waive the inspection. I don't care. I know that this is a good house. I wouldn't do that. I would have a building inspection done. I'm asking for an inspection of this IRU. I'm asking for an inspection of everything that I requested in my notice of motion, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Wow. Yeah, as I can respect your concerns. We said we started off a number of years ago with a certain vision, and then it changed. So now we're looking to probably put more fiber up in the ground. The city can use some. It was a moving document, as a lot of documents are. So, this was the whole idea today, is to ask the questions and get confirmation from our legal team. Is this going forward? And Mr. Brown has expressed that, yes, he's confident in the legal side that the city's going to be protected. Now, we'd like to hear from, I guess, the general contractors couldn't make it. So you know, we got to get it from somebody else. Are they confident besides the subcontractor? You know, is Mr. Nazmi, is he confident we're going in the proper direction? Richard, is that, you know, who can answer the question? You know, Mr. Brown, Mayor Brown has certainly expressed some concerns. The whole idea is here is to get the general contractor, the legal team, to say that we're okay. Can anybody tell us that?
Mr. Chair, if I might just for a moment, I'd like to just offer a further thought to
Okay.
His Worship's comments. And it is this, and I've expressed this thought in a few different ways to a few different people over the course of time. I certainly don't think there's any harm in doing a review. I think the big harm would be the cost of the review itself and whether you get value for that. But I think what this committee and council needs to decide is, what is the project? You know, the agreement was ostensibly arrived at in 2019. It strikes me that some of the things that we're currently discussing are different than what that was. We can do our best to ensure whatever the agreement is on paper, and the city's protected when it's done. But we don't have the purview to determine whether technically you're getting the city's getting what it needs. You know, politically or otherwise, whether the city's getting what it wants, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess I would just offer this, that, and in the scope of a typical, and I'm not an auditor or an accountant, but I have been around these sorts of meetings and otherwise enough to know that you need to figure out what is the scope of what you are seeking. And so if you don't know that, the answer you're going to get at the back end of it's going to be different. And so I think we need to have a sense of what it was that we went into this thing trying to do. And if we're now trying to do something different, then we need to know or figure that out. So I offer that as somebody who's been through, I'm going to say, a dozen iterations of this agreement, that we can put an agreement together to do pretty well whatever you want to do. But if we don't have the parameters, we're not going to have a good agreement. We need to know what it is that we're putting the agreement together for. So I think that's important for the committee to know and not lose sight of. And it's also important if there is, you know, to the mayor's point, if there is going to be some further work done in terms of an evaluation of the project, we need to know what we're evaluating and have the criteria fairly solidly placed. Thanks.
Well, thank you. That certainly helps clarify things for us, Mr. Brown. I appreciate that. You know, do you have any questions, Councillor Ramsey? I mean, you know, it's like, where are we going? I guess it changed so many times, and to see where we're going, where's the completion date, maybe that's the proper thing to do, so.
So we still don't have a date.
No, we don't have a date, like I said. And I think all the agreement is not ironed out yet too, right? So that's a concern. You know, where are we going? What are we getting? Where's the completion date?
Yeah, and that's, like, I think that's the most frustrating part, Mr. Brown and Richard and everybody else, is where is the end date on this thing, eh? And, you know, we can still, like, we can be back here another 6 months.
Yeah.
I'm still going through it and saying, well, this is not signed, or this is not hooked up, or something along that line. Like, I'm not an internet person myself either, but at the same time, is there a closing date on this, Richard? Can somebody answer that? Or no? Or is it still up in the air? I don't know. And that's what I'm looking for.
Well, thank you. Anybody else like to ask a question? Anybody else would like to see? I guess. Mr. Jenkins. Oh, I didn't see your light on, sorry.
Relatively new to the discussion, but it seems to me we have a couple of issues at hand. One is the contractor doesn't appear to be prepared to proceed to complete the project until the agreement's finished. And our council doesn't want to agree to sign an IRU until they have a commitment in terms of what the timelines are to finish the project and and have a sense of what that agreement looks like. I guess we do have the benefit of having the subcontractor here to perhaps articulate what he expects would be the reasonable timeline to complete the work to finish the project. And if we assume that he's not going to commence that work until the IRU is signed, we could say, okay, Mr. Mullen, from the date the contract is signed, the IRU is signed, what are your timelines to complete the project, and tie the subcontractor to those through incentive or penalty provisions that would be tied to the IRU. And then we would then go about negotiating the IRU with the subcontractor, and once that gets finalized, then the subcontractor would be tied to those timelines. But we seem to be at a Mexican standoff or a chicken and egg situation here, and I think the only way forward is for the contractor to commit to timelines in terms of when he's able to complete the project, and also provide that working space for the IRU to be completed, but perhaps subject to completion of the project, after the fact.
Sounds,
Mr. Chair, could I'm just trying to get a clarification from Mr. Jenkins. So to clarify what you're saying, Mr. Jenkins, is that you're saying we'll sign the IRU, and we'll put those deadlines in place. Is that what you're saying? I'm just trying to clarify.
So we would get a commitment from the subcontractor and the contractor, both because, as you say, it's the contractor, the general contractor that is on the hook for it. In terms of a commitment to complete the project, once the IRU is signed, within certain timelines. The IRU could then be negotiated and signed, but also conditional on completion of the project. So the IRU is signed, and it becomes effective on completion of the project. And if the project isn't completed, then the IRU is null and void.
We should get that legally. We get a legal opinion on that. Like, I know you're an accountant, but I think there's a legal requirement here. We can have a signed agreement with conditions, and then if he doesn't fulfill the conditions on the dates that are going to be prescribed by us, that we can just null and void the IRU?
Sure. Like, I'll put it to you this way. If you go back to the letter that we prepared and sent, whatever it was, in November of 2019, these were one of the things that we had expressed at the time, that we needed to have solid timelines and what that meant, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think at this point in time, the issue we're going to get into, as Mr. Jenkins has appropriately pointed out, we're going to have to get the contractor to commit to those timelines, and the city itself is going to have to commit to what it wants, and then the contractor is going to have to agree to go along with that. But I do think that is something, we can't be all over the place. We need to land on what the city wants, and we need to figure out if the contractor can do it, get the timelines, get it on paper, and get the deal done.
that's
Mr. Brown.
the best advice we had yet.
Yeah, Mr. Brown, we're all over the place about this because we've been asking the questions for the last 5 years. That we didn't cause this. We've been asking, where are we at now? As I said, February of 2023, 90%. July of 2023, 90% completed. February of 2024, 90% complete. We get different numbers. We ask for, Richard shows his photos of the vaults, right? Are they spliced? There's 100 vaults there. How many are spliced and are ready to charge up? What about the GPS, GIS? Do we have metal detectors or detectors or trackers that we know where the system is, where the network is? These are all questions that I want to make sure, Mr. Chair, that the contractor, Williams Murphy McLeod, they understand that if it's not finished, and we have no penalties, we have no liquidated penalties in the contract because there was nothing there. There was nothing to abide by. It was just go as let's finish what we have to do, and we'll get Coles to inspect it. We'll get Boyd Woodard to do some inspection work. Mr. Chair, we've been supporting this. We've been patient. We've been trying to work with the utility and the inspectors. We have not been all over the place. It's the information we were asking for and the answers we were getting. That's where it put it all over the place, not us.
Thank you. I don't know.
With Mr. Brown made that last suggestion that, you know, if there's something signed and it's going to be signed by the subcontractor or the contractor and the city with timelines and everything, that's the best that I heard yet.
Do you think
Chair.
that's obtainable? Mr.
Yeah, do you think that's attainable? Like, are both parties going to agree with these timelines? I mean, we're all not lawyers either, so, you know.
I mean, all I can really offer is just the common sense answer to that question, which is that the contractor or subcontractor wants to get this done as much as everybody else. There's still, I think, a couple $100,000 just based on Richard's presentation that would have to be, you know, kind of signed off on to go out to the contractor. So I'm sure they want that money. And obviously the subcontractor wants to get on with whatever operation they're going to have. So there's an impetus there as well. So, you know, all of these things are subject to mutual agreement, which is, I think, the first point that was made here. But, you know, I think that all parties are willing. You know, I think we just need to decide, are we doing some kind of an audit or a review of the process and what the city's getting? Are there other things that the city wishes to negotiate into this agreement? Can we live with whatever terms the contractor's insisting upon? I think there's probably about a half a dozen that the contractor or subcontractor is pushing us on. And we've been kind of saying, I don't think the city could live with that, but we don't have definitive instruction on either because we don't, you know, we haven't gotten to the point where we're set to sign the thing. So
Okay.
anyway,
Thank you very much, Jordan. Appreciate that. Any questions? Any more questions, Mr. Brown? Mayor Brown? Sir?
I appreciate where we got today, and I know you have other things to do, but Mr. Chair,
This is-
are we,
I
like-
marked this one out.
I'm stuck to, you know, I'm sticking to the independent third-party review, but I think we can take the information that Richard presented to us today, compile that information, and take a look at it, whether it's in an Excel or it's in a PDF. Take a look at what I've talked about, fiber installed, fiber spliced, as-built drawings, because the agreement with the province on the Confederation Trail, we are to have as-built drawings submitted to Sharon Sloanwith. They have to be submitted because that is part of the agreement that we signed. And I signed that agreement too, Jordan, with the province to ensure that we did get that, that was part of the deal. The other thing too, Richard, I just want to say, Mr. Chair, the reason I asked Lenny Murphy here, who is our O&S officer, I received, and I brought this up at a committee meeting back in 2020, a call from some frantic neighbors living at Elena Court. There was a contractor working down there at 9 o'clock at night, no lights, no cautionary markings, no flagger, and it was our subcontractor installing the fiber network. And then I shared that information, and someone from our committee, because it was a closed meeting, went back to the contractor, Bobby McKay. Bobby McKay phoned me, furious that I would make that kind of a call. But Lenny's been around, and he's witnessed some of the work that's been done, and you and I have received emails out there on Mount Edward Road from one of your neighbors, and we had to follow up. But that's the other part of this. We have to have occupational and safety standards adhered to. This is not some place that you can just do work in a downtown core or a suburb of Charlottetown and not have the proper markings to indicate this is a work area, or at least with personnel that would provide safety. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for everyone coming and, you know, trying to get us a feeling of where we're at. You know, we've listened to the professionals, you know, we have I think Councilor Ramsey shaking his head there and nodding. It was very beneficial for me. So we're agreeing to look into this. Richard, do you know where we're going with the next step?
So that's precisely my question to the committee. What is your direction to me? And I mean, Jordan and I can work out based on an understanding. It sounds like we will seek a timeline from the contractor post signing of the IRU, their time frame to completion, and we'll have. Jordan mentioned penalties, but I need to review with him. If there's penalties, I believe there's also then rewards when you enter into a contract with a construction type contract. So we need to work out kind of what that looks like or have a time frame from them. But on the legal aspect, I need to work with our lawyer. But my understanding is you want us to get to the point where, okay, once we sign that IRU, how much time are we giving the contract, or the contractor will tell us what their time frame is. And it could be liquidated damages that we do have in our contract, where then if there's any additional cost to us that we are incurring because they haven't met that timeline, then we can charge that back to them. But if it's kind of what you want us to work on is coming up with, once we sign the IRU, what's the time frame to completion? That's what I can bring back to you.
Could you also, Richard, get a confirmation from the general contractor that this is okay? Is this, you know,
Yeah, so they'll have to sign on to this agreement.
yeah, so, you know, that was the whole idea of coming here to see, okay, our legal team says we're okay, the general contractor says we're okay. You know, all these things had to be clarified for the committee. You know, that's what we were hoping to get today. I mean, it's very beneficial. I mean, we've been going down a road, but, you know, I know the subcontractors here, and but I just want the general contractor, someone to say it's okay, things are going ahead. You know, you're confident, our legal team's confident, general contractor's confident, we're gonna get to completion. This is, you know, without going to an agreement. If we have to go to, you know, the mayor's notice of motion and get that, I mean, that's another costly thing, but if that has to happen, we have to get it going, right? So,
Chair, just
Yes, sir.
page 8 of his document, he outlined verification documentation of fiber optic cable installed. Richard, can we get a report that compiles all that information, the photos, it can be a digital format, so that we can have something to say, okay, if we want to get that third party, it won't be as expansive or expanded of the first contract that looked at doing everything. This would just be looking at what we compiled through your efforts working with the contractor and the subcontractor.
yeah, that's reasonable.
Thank you.
We good with that, Richard?
Yes, and I mean, really what I presented to you was that photo log and the record of where the infrastructure is, and we take that information and put it into our own GIS system. And as-built, we typically get after a project, and we'd be using all of that information to show where it is. Right now, the conduit is in there, and most of it is loaded, and you can see that in the photo logs, and you can see it walking around the city. Those vaults are there, they are present.
Well, I'll need a summary to go back to council. You know, we need that. Thank you very much, everybody, for showing up today.
Mr. Chair, I have the sense that perhaps the subcontractor may have some
Wanna talk?
thoughts. I know we had indicated that it was important that he be here, so if it's the will of the chair and the committee, I don't know if you want to provide that opportunity.
I'm good with that. Are you, Kevin? Mr. Brown?
Here, just again, on a point of privilege, and I should say a point of privilege, just a point of clarification. He's the subcontractor. The general contractor is Williams Murphy McLeod, Rodney Murphy. That's who signed the agreement with the city of Charlottetown. And it's WM&M that has the surety bond on this job. Okay, thank you.
Did you want to say a
Yes, please. Just want to show you that.
Uh-huh.
So the first thing you see there is a copper wire.
Mr. Muller?
There we go here, yes. You'll see a you'll see a thin copper wire that's used to trace the line. Then you'll see two white cores, which are meant to give strength to that piece of plastic. And in between those two white cores at the end of the cable are 24 fiber optic strands. And each of those glass strands with the color on it is 1/4 of a millimeter. And when it's stripped down, it's 1/8 of a millimeter. So when we talk about what did the city buy, that's what they bought. Now you go open a vault and you see a cable the size of your little finger, one the size of your thumb, that's what we bought. So when someone says, you know, what did this network cost? How much did we pay for it as a city? You know, my competitors are running around joking, calling me the $6 million man, because I've put a lot of money into this network. And I talked to someone in provincial government who said, you're very trusting. You don't have an agreement with the city, and you've put all of this money in the ground, and you've got no guarantee whatsoever that you're going to be able to use your own facilities. So by way of an example, in order to access the fiber at each of these lift stations, we'd have to put in a vault. So in the entire project, we had planned for 12, 13, 14 vaults. There's over 159 vaults in this network. And the reason is we want to be able to go through Sherwood, we want to go through East Royalty and be able to hook up apartment buildings, be able to hook up government offices, and add customers to the network, which the city will make money doing. And all of that is on my dime. All that conduit that goes out on Route 2 and on 1A, that's on my dime. So if the city says, great, we don't want to have an IRU, great. I'll take out my vaults, I'll take out my big cables, and I'll go put them somewhere else, and we'll put in that little thin cable. And Mr. Mayor had mentioned clause 5 point something in the proposed IRU. Take a pen right now and cancel it. If you guys don't want free fiber, that was the freeload clause, that if I pay at my own expense to put a new line in this city, that we would, out of gratitude to the city, and because Peter Kelly is a hell of a negotiator who literally broke my arm, the city was getting free capacity. When I go out and build something 100% with my own money, the city was going to get free capacity in every line. I would gladly remove that from the IRU in a heartbeat. So I will answer any questions anyone has, but as to how long is it going to get this spliced, it's very simple. From the moment that the city has finally signed an IRU that it contemplated giving us in 2020, that we've been waiting 3.5 years for, then we can start splicing immediately. The only reason we're not splicing right now, and I don't want to jump around here, but I want to answer the first question. We are 100% done of construction. And the reason that Rodney Murray didn't come here today, because I spoke to him this morning, he says, I've got nothing left. There's no construction left. For the last week and a half, my guys have been going out and putting topsoil around and cleaning things up. If there's a vault that settled 4 years ago, they've reset it and moved it around. They've cleaned stuff up. But basically, we're going around doing good housekeeping right now. There are no more construction efforts left. It's all done. And we're waiting, quite honestly, for direction, because, quite honestly, you don't see it in committee. There's not a lot of resources in the city. I would be probably not willing to sign any IRU agreement where there's a time bomb on the end of it, because I can't be sure that the city can turn around a decision in a timely way. It's really difficult for the city to get everyone together. You know, we were ready to finish the last stage of this before Easter, and it took 9 weeks to get everyone on board who could actually approve the last bore that took us into the pollution control plant. And that's just how things are. You know, I can go back and look over the length of the contract. We had 9 months of delays because we had to meet OHS commitments. And in that time, if they say, you can't do any work, we literally would have a hole open that we couldn't close because we were forbidden at that time by that particular OHS person from doing anything. So we're here, you know, subject to what does District Heat need? What does Bell need? What does Eastlink need? What does Maritime Electric need? What does Water and Sewer need? What does Public Works needs? Oh, the province is involved. Do they have signalization? oh, there's another contractor in. We've had examples of private entities, private companies that have put stuff in the public right-of-way and have not removed it, that we've had to work around. You know, that's unbelievable. No one has to do anything like that in another jurisdiction, only here in Charlottetown. And, you know, we've worked in areas where there's lines in place from the 1880s, okay? From the 1880s. And no one's been able to get through there until we've come along and done it. We've built something that's really remarkable. We have amazing amounts of capacity. Consider that the contract called for 12 strands. We've got fiber in the city right now that's 288 strands. And by way of comparison, there's a contract waiting for me in Moncton. And the guy there in Moncton, you know how big Moncton is, they're only putting in 144 strands, right? We're doing double the capacity here because we're trying to build something that's going to be future-proof. And, you know, speaking to the IRU, we're there having put, like, whether Richard, using old numbers from the United States, using low estimates, says it's worth $3.5 million, whether it's the guy in Toronto that tried to buy my network who says it's worth at least $6 million, the point is there's no free lunch. The city has gotten a fantastic deal. And when I first walked into Richard's office and he said, we can't do this the way you'd like, that you build it and we get a share of it. We have to own it all. Richard can tell you this. I said, okay, we're done. We can't do this. It will not work. He said, no, we're going to find a way. And it's because of my trust in this one man that I have put myself way out there in terms of materials, time, engineering, and opportunity costs that we've given up to work on this contract. And I would love to have had this IRU signed years ago, because then certain costs would have been on the city. In the last 4 years, we've incurred almost $120,000 in repair work for damages to this network and to our equipment. And I'm eating that. You know, we've had one company that has actually reimbursed us, but there's other sections where the companies are refusing to reimburse us when they've damaged the conduit. So, you know, this is a very, very, very difficult issue. And we're sitting here right now saying, you know, the city told us, trust us, we're going to do this, we're going to act in good faith, and they're doing the best they can with the resources they have. But I mean, Charlottetown is so much behind other places. You have to remember, like, Summerside, which is a fraction of the size of Charlottetown, has had its own fiber optic network for, 10 or 20 years. And they're using that to their advantage, right? We don't have any plans, like in the new Simmons Arena, if there's going to be a warming center there, to have internet access as part of this network. And there's an opportunity there because, you know, I'm given to understand there's a secret contract with Bell where nobody's allowed to talk about the terms of it, but it's known that there's a contract with Bell. And I think the city's paying Bell probably, you know, $20,000 a month. There's definitely room for the city to save money. And it's the same thing. If this fiber optic line would service even just 1,000 low-income houses, so seniors or people getting social assistance, and they pay $60 a month for internet instead of $120 a month, okay? That's $720 a year. Put some tax on it. Let's just call it $800. $800 a year extra in that household. If it's just 1,000 households, that's $800,000 a year that stays in this community that people can use for food and things that they need. And the city, if we hook up 1,000 paying customers, the city's going to take in hundreds of thousands of dollars. And not with anything that they paid for, with something I paid for. So it is beyond comprehension that we do not have an IRU signed, and it's beyond comprehension for me that we're not now saying, let's go out and do it. Now, one last thing. If there was an emergency tomorrow and we said for some crazy reason, every single lift station has to have one strand hooked up, or the world will blow up, Mr. Mullen, can you get it done? We could have every station on a fiber in 10 days. But consider, we have 100,000 splices to do. A small portion of those are for you. The rest are ours. But when we come into a vault and we dress that cable and we start taking those strands, right? And we do that splice. If we don't do all the splices at the same time and we have to come back and break it and start over, it's very wasteful, it's very expensive. It's like Mr. Brown was talking, Mayor Brown was talking about building a house. If you've custom designed a house and you say, put the walls here and do everything else, and you get the key and you open it, you walk in for the first time, and then you say, oh, I want all the walls moved, it's going to get pretty expensive. And that's why we're at the point we're at right now. That's why in our plan for construction, it's all done. All the physical construction is done. All the conduit that has to go in the ground is in the ground. All the vaults that have to be there are there. The equipment's been here in PEI for a year and a half now. We'd like to light it up. There's equipment in the basement that's working. There's equipment over at 70 Kent Street. There's equipment out at the well field that's there, and the light's running, and there's data going back and forth. We would love to have this thing running because you'll make money, we'll make money, and citizens will save money. And if you want to do a value for money audit, call Jim Sentence at UPEI and ask him to do the math on it. There's no need to go around and check stuff that's already there. NASME is right behind me. He can hop in his truck, take out one of my workers and say, open up every one of these vaults. Yeah, I can see the cable. If you don't want to believe the photos that we've done, he can go out and look. There's no need to spend $66,000
Plus tax.
plus tax. And quite honestly, I have a problem with the company that was selected doing it because they're my competitor. And I'm very concerned that I just found out here half an hour ago that apparently Atlantic Broadband, which is a competitor to us in designing networks, has been apparently given access to our contract. You know, there's a reason why Jordan has not been able to see examples of IRU agreements. Those are highly detailed and highly secretive contracts. I have agreements with other companies that if I even admitted that there's an IRU in place, I would be subject to penalties because they want total silence on these things. And that I now hear that our IRU is out in the wild with one of my competitors is unbelievable. I really have trouble with that. With that, I'll answer any question that anyone has.
Oh, well, thank you, Mr. Mullen, for that. I mean, you're 100% done of construction. The only thing is to tie in the fiber op. That's great. Great to know.
So it's 100%, Mr., so the 90%, cancel that off?
Yeah.
Josh?
100% construction is
Is done.
Construction is
Okay.
100% complete.
Okay, so Mr. Chair, now we're up to 288 strands, just clarification, is that correct?
The city contracted for 12 strands.
No, but you have 288 strands to go in. Is that right? I'm trying to figure it out. Can you clarify? You said,
I am clarifying right now.
yes?
For 12 strands in the
Right.
entire network.
Yes.
And an extra 12 strands between McAleer and City Hall.
Yeah. But you mentioned that.
That's all you're getting.
No, you get 228 strands that are going in for you, for UCC.
I have cable with 288
Okay.
strands in it, in some areas and not
Okay.
in others.
Okay,
I
so-
put it where it makes sense.
Mr. Chair, again, Summerside, you had an agreement with them. Is that still operational?
Summerside sold us some of their network.
Right.
We still own it.
You're still operating that in Summerside?
We still own it.
You're still operating it? Not own it, operating it. Are you still operating that system in Summerside?
I don't get where you're going with this.
Operating means that you're selling strands to, you're selling optic to,
We're-
fiber op to Summerside citizens.
We're not
Okay,
allowed
okay.
to put service to individual citizens in Summerside unless we go through the Summerside network. We have a
Mr.
separate backbone network, which is what Charlottetown's looking to do,
Yeah.
and that's ours. That has nothing to do with Summerside.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask this committee, I want to have senior administration, maybe Dan, to look into this secret contract with Bell. I don't know what this is. I want to find out what he's talking about. I want that checked off. The other thing, too, I know, Mr. Chair, that the concern that was down there at our wastewater treatment plant on Riverside Drive, if we remember last year, UCC hit one of our forced sewer mains. Over 6 million liters of sewage went into the harbor. So there's some concern, and I think That's what Lenny and their occupational health and safety team had, and I'd say the pollution control. So, there's some markers that we had to put up, and I recall last year on Good Friday, when UCC ran into a Bell Alliant line, 2 trucks were down here, 8 men, maybe 12 service people. So what I need from you, and this is part of putting everything together for the audit, and IRUs being secret documents, that's the first time I've ever heard that. But as for the business investment, I'm asking again, Mr. Chair, documentation of financial claims, which Mr. McEwen provided, made by all parties should be reviewed to determine all expenses where eligible under the definition of the project and in accordance with Infrastructure Canada's federal provincial agreement. Secondly, does UCC have any supporting business documentation? Because you should have payables or receivables that we should be looking at if we're going to be going on to the next stage.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
at this point, I do not trust you. I cannot trust you.
Okay.
And-
There is no way I would give up
Okay.
any private business documents that you are going to give to my competitor.
I don't know what's going on here. Like, so what we did is, this was very informative right up to now. We got an answer of 100% construction completed. Now the strands are going in. So this would be something that Richard and Mr. Jordan Brown could look at to see where we're going, right? And I thank you, Mr. Mullins, for your explanation on things. And the mayor has a lot of legitimate concerns that we've looked at, but we're not going down this road right now. Mr. McEwen is going to get us a report, are you not? Okay, so he's going to work with Mr. Brown, Mr. Jordan Brown, and we'll get the information, right? So, and then we're going to move forward. There's been a lot of trust here between everything, so we're just trying to. And we're going to get that letter from the general contractor just to confirm that everything is going well, too, right? We're above board, we want to get this stuff completed, so that's where this whole information session was going today.
And Mr. Chair,
And yes, sir?
it's just so that we get it correct, that the general contractor signs off, 100% complete. Can we get that?
Okay.
Thank
sure,
you.
Sure.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank
for
you.
everyone for coming in. It's certainly been an eye-opener for us, Kevin.
Move to adjourn.
Yes, we move to adjourn. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Pauline.
Thank you, Bobby.